Natalie? Oh please, everyone knows the inheritance was meant for Alyssa. That sentence. Carelessly thrown out by my own mother at a family gathering. It wasn't even whispered. She said it like it was common knowledge, something you'd say about the weather or who baked the pie. And yet it hit me like a freight train. I'm Natalie Hughes. 35 years old, born and raised in Savannah, Georgia, in a family where appearances were everything and affections were selective. Growing up, we lived in a white-column Georgian-style home tucked into the heart of one of Savannah's historic districts, oak trees draped in Spanish moss, garden parties with lace napkins, and polite conversations that always skirted anything too real. My parents, Robert and Elaine Hughes, came from what folks around here like to call old Southern money. But what they lacked in warmth, they made up for in ceremony. And in that ceremony, Alyssa, my younger sister by 3 years, was always the star. From the time we were kids, it was clear. I was the reliable one. The quiet achiever. The one who did her homework without being told. Alyssa? She sparkled. She flitted through life with wide eyes and effortless charm, saying just enough of the right things to make people feel special. Our parents adored her for it. When I brought home a straight-A report card in 8th grade, my father gave me a distracted nod from behind his newspaper. Good job, Nat, he said without looking up. The same month, Alyssa got a B+ in English and the whole house lit up like Christmas. Mom threw a celebration dinner, baked her favorite key lime pie from scratch, and beamed as she told the story to everyone within earshot. Alyssa's been working so hard. She deserves it. I remember sitting at that dinner table, poking at overcooked green beans, wondering what it would take to be seen like that. But I wasn't entirely invisible. Not to everyone. My grandparents, Thomas and June Whitaker, lived just outside the city, in a gently aging riverside home that smelled of lavender and old leather books. Their house didn't have marble floors or crystal chandeliers. What it had was comfort. Love. Real conversation. And every other weekend, it became my sanctuary. Grandma June would sit with me for hours in her sunroom, sipping chamomile tea and asking about my latest projects. She remembered what I told her. She followed up. She made me feel like I mattered. Grandpa Thomas called me his thinker. He'd pat my head and say, "Natalie's got her head on straighter than half the men running this town." I still remember that Thanksgiving when I was 11, my science fair project had just won first place. I had waited at the school auditorium for 2 hours, scanning the crowd for my parents. They never came. That night, at dinner, Grandma's voice was firmer than I'd ever heard. "Robert, you missed Natalie's award ceremony." My father, cutting his turkey, barely looked up. Alyssa had rehearsal. Her ballet showcase is next weekend. You know how important that is to her future. Does Natalie's future not count? Grandpa added quietly, his tone sharper than usual. My mother sighed, that sigh she always gave when she didn't want to be the bad guy. They just have different needs. Natalie's independent. She doesn't need as much attention. That line stuck with me for years. You don't need as much. As if love were a finite resource, and I was greedy for wanting more. By the time we hit our teens, Alyssa had perfected the art of staying on top. If I mentioned I wanted to apply to a prestigious university, she'd suddenly express interest in the same one, prompting our parents to hire her tutors, advisors, even a personal essay coach. When I won a regional poetry award in high school, she came down with a mysterious illness that very day. And, of course, my parents stayed home with her. "You're the strong one, Natalie," my mom told me when I got upset. "Your sister's more sensitive." That word again. Strong. It sounded like a compliment, but it always came right before being told I didn't deserve help. So I stopped asking. Instead, I worked. I studied. I picked finance in college, not because I loved it, but because I overheard my dad once say, "I admire women who understand money." That one offhand comment kept me pushing through years of numbers and stress and job interviews, just to hear him maybe say he was proud. He never did. I built a life in Charlotte, North Carolina, 2 states and one emotional galaxy away from my childhood. I climbed the ranks at a sustainable investment firm, made partner at 33, bought my own loft apartment. I still sent birthday cards. Still called home on Sundays. Still hoped, foolishly, that one day they'd look at me the way they looked at Alyssa. But that day never came. Not when I got promoted. Not when I donated to their church in their name. Not even when I came home and told them I'd just led my first multi-million-dollar portfolio review. No, they were too busy talking about Alyssa's new boutique opening. Or her breakup. Or her latest personal growth retreat in Arizona. So I stayed quiet. Until the day my grandparents died. And everything changed. When I think back on those years, it's not the silence of my parents I remember first. It's the sound of Grandma June's voice humming gospel hymns as she tended to her roses. It's the way Grandpa Thomas whistled low and soft when he was concentrating, brows furrowed, glasses slipping down his nose, papers spread across his old mahogany desk. Their riverside home in Bluffton, just outside Savannah, became my refuge. Not just physically, but emotionally. Whenever I crossed the bridge and pulled onto their gravel driveway lined with camellias, something inside me relaxed. As if I could finally exhale. I visited them almost every other weekend during high school and well into college. No matter how busy life got, that rhythm remained sacred. I'd sit with Grandma in the breakfast nook, the light streaming through lace curtains while she poured tea into delicate porcelain cups. We'd talk for hours, sometimes about life, sometimes about nothing at all. She remembered things no one else ever did. The name of my high school English teacher. That I hated bell peppers. That I once dreamed of writing a novel when I was 12. And every now and then, she'd say something that stuck deep in my bones. Being invisible in your own family doesn't mean you're unworthy, sweetheart, she told me once. It means you shine in a way they're just not equipped to see. Grandpa, on the other hand, was a man of logic and ledgers. A retired financial analyst, he was quiet by nature but deeply observant. During my sophomore year at UNC Charlotte, I lost a major scholarship due to departmental budget cuts. When I called my parents for help, my mother sighed and said, "Natalie, you know we're already covering Alyssa's full tuition at SCAD. She's not as resourceful as you. Can't you just apply for another loan?" I hadn't even told them that I lost sleep for weeks helping Alyssa with her art school applications, editing her portfolio, prepping her essays, staying up late to review submissions while I let my own midterms slide. 2 days after that phone call, Grandpa rang me. His voice was calm, but purposeful. "Natalie, your grandma and I were thinking, how would you feel about us making an investment in your education?" I remember blinking at the wall, stunned. "Grandpa, I'm not asking for a handout." "This isn't charity," he interrupted gently. "This is a long-term investment. And you, my dear, have always had the best return on character." They paid not just the remaining balance of my undergrad tuition, but also for my graduate program, a master's in environmental and social governance investing. The exact field I now work in. The irony isn't lost on me, the only people who ever truly invested in me were the ones who didn't have to. That's when Grandpa started inviting me into his study for what he jokingly called money chats. The room smelled of cigar boxes and old books, walls lined with decades of financial journals and hardcover biographies. I was the only one he ever brought in there. He'd open up dusty family ledgers dating back generations. "Our family didn't always handle wealth wisely," he confessed one rainy Saturday, flipping through a yellowing ledger. "In 29, we nearly lost everything. But it was your great-great-grandmother who started quietly investing in commodities behind closed doors. Women weren't supposed to know numbers then. But she saved this family." He told me about how money came and went. How the illusion of wealth destroyed more people than poverty ever could. He taught me how to read behind the numbers, spotting patterns, knowing when to walk away, and more importantly, when to stand your ground. Those afternoons weren't just about finance. They were about family legacy. About preparing me for something I didn't even know I would face. And then there was Grandma, with her own kind of wisdom. One morning in her garden, as we pruned lavender bushes, she looked over and said, "Natalie, there's a strength in you your parents never knew how to nurture. But that doesn't mean you have to harden." I didn't say anything then, but I felt the truth of her words bloom quietly inside me. As the years passed, the contrast between their home and my parents grew sharper. My parents threw dinner parties with curated guest lists and catered food. My grandparents made pot roast and let the neighbors bring pies. My parents talked about prestige. My grandparents talked about values. They never told me I had to prove my worth. They never once compared me to Alyssa. They just loved me. Unconditionally. And when I reflect on everything that came next, on the storm that followed their deaths, on the battle over what they left behind, I realize something very clearly now. They weren't just leaving me an inheritance. They were leaving me their trust. It was a Sunday afternoon when the call came. I was folding laundry in my apartment, half listening to an audiobook, when my phone rang. I didn't recognize the number, but something in my gut tightened before I even picked up. "Is this Ms. Natalie Hughes?" "Yes." "This is Officer Chandler from Beaufort County Sheriff's Department. I'm so sorry to inform you, ma'am. There's been an accident on Highway 170. Your grandparents, Thomas and June Whitaker, they were involved. We did everything we could, but I don't remember much after that. Just the sound of my knees hitting the floor and the laundry basket tumbling over. A sock rolled beneath the couch like it was trying to escape the reality I couldn't outrun. They were coming home from a weekend at Hilton Head. A truck had veered into their lane. It was quick, they said. Merciful, even. Merciful. The word made me want to scream. The funeral was held the following Saturday, in the garden of their home, the same garden where Grandma taught me how to deadhead roses and believe in my worth. The air smelled like magnolias and wet soil. I stood in black, my heart a battlefield of grief and disbelief. That's when Alyssa made her entrance. She swept in like a Southern belle auditioning for a drama she hadn't even watched the first act of. Flowing black dress. Oversized sunglasses. Dabbing her eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief. She hadn't seen our grandparents in nearly a year, but you'd think she lived in their guest room. "Oh, Natalie," she sobbed, hugging me with all the grace of a stage curtain drop. This is devastating. Grandma June was like a second mother to me." I pulled back. "A second mother?" Her eyes narrowed. "Don't be petty. This isn't about you." "No. Of course not. It never was." My parents stood off to the side, speaking in hushed tones with family friends, accepting condolences with somber nods and the occasional pat of the hand. To them, it was a social obligation. A performance. A polite tragedy. To me, it was the loss of the only people who had ever seen me, not as a disappointment, not as the strong one, not as a shadow, but as their granddaughter. A week later, we gathered in a lawyer's office in downtown Savannah. An old brick building with ivy crawling up the sides and a narrow staircase that creaked with every step. Mr. Alan Prescott, my grandparents' longtime attorney, greeted us in a crisp navy suit and glasses that looked older than I was. He spoke gently but firmly. Mr. and Mrs. Whitaker updated their will last fall. They requested that the reading be held in person, with immediate family present. My father cleared his throat. "I assume the estate will be divided evenly." Prescott offered a tight-lipped smile. "Actually, not quite." He opened a thick folder and began reading. "To our beloved granddaughter Natalie Elaine Hughes, we leave the following: our primary residence at 103 Willow Bend Lane, all adjoining property, and its contents, our savings and investment accounts totaling approximately $14.2 million, and all family heirlooms and historical records in our possession." The room went still. The air itself felt heavier. Prescott continued, unfazed. "To our granddaughter Alyssa Rose Hughes, we leave $100,000 in trust, to be used at her discretion for personal development, education, or therapy. I heard Alyssa gasp. What the hell? My mother's face went pale. My father leaned forward, his voice sharp. Is this some kind of mistake? There's more, Prescott said. To our son-in-law and daughter, Robert and Elaine Hughes, we leave $250,000 in shared assets and a collection of fine art stored in our Savannah home. Alyssa shot up from her seat. This is outrageous. Natalie must have manipulated them, there's no way they'd just. Prescott raised a hand. If I may finish. He opened a sealed envelope, pulled out a letter, handwritten, on my grandmother's signature floral stationery. In our final years, we found clarity in silence. We saw how Natalie stood by us, not for what she could gain, but because she simply loved us. This decision was not made lightly. We've given plenty over the years to the rest of the family, vacations, tuition, loans we forgave. This is what we chose for our legacy. Let it stand. I looked around the room. My mother's lips were pursed so tightly, they were almost white. My father stared at the desk like he was calculating a different reality. Alyssa's eyes were wild, part betrayal, part disbelief. And me? I sat there quietly, heart pounding, trying to breathe. I hadn't asked for any of this. I didn't even know they'd changed the will. But as the shock rippled through the room, one thing became achingly clear. The people who always made me feel invisible were finally being forced to see me. The fallout was instant. Before we even left the lawyer's office, Alyssa was already on the phone with someone, probably one of her self-styled crisis PR friends from her boutique days. My parents were quieter, but the way my father gripped the armrest told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't over. And I was right. 3 days later, I was served. A formal lawsuit, filed by my own parents and sister, accusing me of undue influence over Thomas and June Whitaker, alleging elder manipulation, fraud, and coercion. In simpler terms? They were saying I conned my own grandparents into leaving me everything. I sat in my living room in Charlotte, the court documents trembling in my hands. I had read plenty of legalese in my field, but nothing could have prepared me for seeing my name accused of manipulating the only people who ever truly loved me. I called Mr. Prescott that night. He sighed, unsurprised. They're angry, Natalie. Angry people look for villains. And I'm the easiest one to cast, I whispered. Let them play their part, he said gently. Your grandparents prepared for this. Trust me. What followed was the most emotionally exhausting month of my life. Depositions. Statements. Emails turned over for discovery. Alyssa accused me of isolating our grandparents in their final years, of cutting her off from their lives. She even claimed I had forged parts of the will, though handwriting analysis disproved that immediately. They brought in extended relatives as character witnesses, aunts and uncles who hadn't visited in years suddenly remembering how clingy I'd been with Grandma June, how strangely possessive I was at family gatherings. It was a circus. But the worst part? It worked, at least in the court of public opinion. People whispered. Church friends. Neighbors. Even old teachers. She always seemed so intense. Maybe she did manipulate them. You know, quiet ones can be sneaky. I had to stop going to the grocery store in Savannah. I'd catch people staring, like they were trying to figure out if I was a grieving granddaughter or a gold-digging fraud. But I showed up to court. Every day. Hair tied back. Navy blazer. Face calm even when my heart was a fist in my chest. My parents sat across from me in the courtroom, stone-faced. Alyssa clutched a tissue dramatically, though I didn't see a single tear. They called their witnesses. They replayed phone call records, trying to frame my regular check-ins with Grandpa's grooming. They questioned why I visited so often. And then, it was our turn. Mr. Prescott stood like a man holding a loaded truth and no fear. His calm was terrifying in its confidence. First, he presented financial records. Over the past decade, my grandparents had paid nearly $2.7 million toward Alyssa's art school tuition, multiple failed business ventures, and even a luxury condo she'd later abandoned in Charleston. All gifts. No repayments. No complaints. Next, he brought up correspondence, emails and handwritten notes between my grandparents and their financial advisor, showing that they had updated their will multiple times, each time with growing clarity that their intention was to leave the estate to me. But what came next changed everything. He pulled out a flash drive. This, he said, was recorded 6 weeks before their passing. With their full consent. The courtroom hushed. A video played on the monitor. It showed Grandpa sitting in his study, glasses perched on his nose, Grandma at his side. Grandpa looked straight into the camera. "If you're watching this," he said, "you're probably in court." A few chuckles broke the tension in the room. "I want to make one thing clear, we were not coerced, manipulated, or confused. Natalie has been the most consistent, respectful, and loyal member of this family for years. She never asked for anything. Never expected anything. But she showed up. Over and over again." Grandma added, softly, "We gave to Alyssa. We gave to Robert and Elaine. We hoped it would help them grow. But Natalie? She grew herself. All we're doing now is acknowledging that." My breath hitched. The video ended. Silence hung heavy. Then Mr. Prescott produced one final envelope. A letter from Grandma, handwritten, dated, and notarized. "To the court," she wrote, "and to anyone who may question our decision, please understand. We are not punishing anyone. We are simply choosing to reward the one who loved us for who we were, not what we had." The judge leaned back in his chair. "Well," he said slowly, "that's about as clear as a Georgia sunrise." 2 hours later, the suit was dismissed. With prejudice. Meaning they couldn't file it again. Alyssa stormed out of the courtroom. My mother didn't even look at me. My father paused, just long enough to glance my way with something that almost resembled guilt. Almost. And me? I stood there, blinking away tears I hadn't allowed myself to cry. It wasn't about the money. It never was. It was about finally being believed, not by the court, but by the people who had always known the truth. Even from beyond the grave. Grandma and Grandpa had my back. A week after the lawsuit was dismissed, I received another envelope from Mr. Prescott. Hand-delivered. No stamps. No markings. Just my name, written in my grandmother's looping, graceful script. Inside was a short letter. And a key. The letter was dated exactly 1 month before their deaths. "Natalie. If you're holding this, then the dust has probably settled, or started to. And now we can tell you the rest. There's one more gift, call it a trust, a challenge, a chance. We left instructions with Alan to unlock the second part of our estate only after the courts have ruled. We knew there'd be a storm. But we also knew you'd weather it. Love, always. Grandma June." My hands were shaking as I drove to Prescott's office the next morning. He greeted me with the warmest smile I'd seen since this nightmare began. "Your grandparents had foresight," he said, unlocking a safe behind his desk. Inside, a slim red folder, a USB drive, and a copy of a private addendum to the original will. The contents? A secondary trust. $3 million. Not in my name. Not directly. Instead, the trust was set aside, pending a choice. In a recorded video message, my grandfather explained. "This trust, Natalie, is meant to restore something that was broken. But only if it's earned. Your parents and Alyssa will receive equal shares of the trust, if and only if they meet 2 conditions. Condition 1, they must participate in 12 months of family therapy, with a licensed counselor approved by the estate. Condition 2, they must each write a personal letter to Natalie, acknowledging the hurt caused by years of favoritism and erasure, and expressing a genuine desire to repair what's left of our family." It was stunning. And honestly? It made me angry. They had dragged me through court. Smeared my name. Treated me like a stranger. And now I was being asked to reward them? Prescott must have sensed the storm inside me. You don't have to do it, he said gently. This isn't an obligation. Your grandparents hoped, not expected. The decision is entirely yours. I left without saying a word. That night, I sat on the porch of my grandparents' old home, staring out at the water. The river was calm, glassy under the moonlight, like it had no memory of storms. Part of me wanted to burn that addendum. Leave them in the dust they tried to bury me under. But then I remembered my grandmother's words from a morning long ago, pruning her garden. Natalie, grace doesn't mean being a doormat. It means standing tall enough to offer a hand, even when no one offered you theirs. Was I capable of that? Could I offer them a chance to show up, after all this time? By sunrise, I had my answer. I called Mr. Prescott. Let them try, I said. If they can meet the terms. I'm willing. He paused. Are you sure? I swallowed. No. But I think Grandma would have wanted me to be. And maybe, just maybe, a second kind of inheritance was worth fighting for too. The first session was awkward in ways I hadn't anticipated. It was a crisp Thursday morning in early spring when I walked into the white brick office just outside Savannah's historic district. The place smelled like lavender and old carpet, comforting but tired. The receptionist smiled and offered me tea. I declined. Inside the therapy room, there were 4 chairs arranged in a semicircle, too intentional to be natural, too intimate to be comfortable. A floor lamp cast a soft light over the beige rug. A small sound machine hummed faintly in the corner, trying to pretend it could drown out a decade of resentment. Dr. Kaplan was our therapist. A middle-aged woman with gentle eyes and sharp instincts. The kind who could clock tension in a room before you even said your name. She began simply. Thank you for coming. I know this isn't easy for anyone. Understatement of the year. My parents sat side by side on the couch. My mother, Helen, wore her usual pearls and pressed blouse, like she was heading to a church luncheon, not therapy. My father, Robert, clutched a leather-bound journal like it might protect him from judgment. Alyssa was the last to arrive. She walked in 5 minutes late, sunglasses on, coffee in hand, smelling faintly of citrus and tension. She didn't look at me when she sat down. Dr. Kaplan took a deep breath. Let's start with something simple. I'd like each of you to describe Natalie in 1 word. I nearly laughed. My father cleared his throat. Independent. My mother added, strong. Alyssa hesitated, then said, reserved. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. The words said everything. Not loving. Not loyal. Not hurt. Just adjectives that kept me at arm's length. Over the next few weeks, we met every Thursday. Sometimes, I'd leave feeling like maybe, there was something salvageable. Other times, I'd cry the entire drive home, fists clenched around the steering wheel, wondering why I ever agreed to this. But session by session, something shifted. At week 5, Dr. Kaplan asked us to each read a memory about my grandparents. I brought an old journal entry, one I wrote the day after Grandpa taught me how to balance my first investment portfolio. Alyssa read a birthday card Grandma once sent her in college, sweet but impersonal. My mother, she surprised me. She pulled out a yellowing recipe card. This was the first thing my mother ever taught me to cook, she said softly. Lemon chess pie. We made it together the day after I got engaged. I haven't made it since. I saw something crack in her voice. It was fleeting. But real. In week 8, Dr. Kaplan asked a harder question. When was the first time you realized Natalie felt, outside of this family? Silence. I thought no one would answer. Then my father shifted. Cleared his throat. When she was 12. She won the district science award. And we forgot to show up. His voice was raw. I didn't think she needed us there. She never acted like she did. But that night, when we came home, she was in her room. Door closed. I found the trophy in the trash the next day. I felt something crack in me, then. A truth I hadn't expected to hear out loud. And Alyssa, she surprised me most. One session, after everyone else had gone silent, she looked up and said, "I used to be scared of you." I blinked. What? You always knew what you wanted. And people respected you. I felt like I had to be louder, prettier, messier, just to get seen. For a moment, I saw not the girl who mocked me, who let our parents dismiss me for decades, but a sister who had been lost in her own mirror of comparison. Dr. Kaplan assigned us individual letters in week 11. We had to write a private message to one another. No reading out loud. Just exchange. When I opened my mother's envelope, her handwriting was surprisingly shaky. Natalie. I didn't know how to mother someone like you. You were quiet, and I mistook it for distance. You were capable, and I mistook it for not needing me. You were strong, and I used that as an excuse to not ask if you were okay. I'm sorry. I see now what I didn't let myself see before. And I'm proud of you. Not because of what you've achieved, but because you chose love when we didn't. I cried. For the first time in years, I cried not from rage or grief, but from being seen. By week 12, something had shifted. We weren't healed. But the wound had stopped festering. Dr. Kaplan handed us a simple form. Certification of completion, family reconciliation therapy. I signed mine first. Then Alyssa. Then, quietly, my parents. It didn't erase the past. But it opened the door to something new. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was standing outside the house looking in. The check cleared on a quiet Monday morning. I was sitting at the old breakfast table in my grandparents' house, the one with a small scratch from when I'd spilled orange juice during a spelling test in 7th grade. The house was still and sunlit, birds chirping beyond the window. Mr. Prescott called. "It's official," he said simply. "The trust has been executed. All parties met the conditions." I sat there for a moment, just breathing. Not because of the money, though, yes, it was a significant amount, but because this chapter had finally closed. And maybe, something else had just opened. Alyssa called that evening. Not a text. Not an email. An actual call. "Hey," she said, voice cautious. "I just wanted to say, thank you. For allowing us the chance." I didn't say anything right away. I could hear her fidgeting with something, probably her necklace. She always did that when she was nervous. "I know it doesn't undo anything," she continued. "But I meant what I wrote in that letter. About being scared of you. About resenting you for the wrong reasons." I softened. "Thanks for saying that." A pause. Then she added, "Would you want to get lunch next week?" No pressure. I agreed. Not because I was ready, but because I wanted to see if something new could grow. My parents didn't reach out right away, but I received a letter from my father 2 days later. It was typed. Straightforward. But tucked at the end was a handwritten line. "I watched you stand taller than all of us, even when we tried to knock you down. I was wrong. I see that now. Dad." It wasn't an apology, exactly. But it was enough. And it was real. That weekend, I went through the final boxes in my grandparents' attic. Old ledgers. Travel journals. Newspaper clippings from Grandpa's early career. I found a photo tucked inside Grandma's gardening book. It was me, age 9, holding a daisy chain crown she'd helped me make. On the back, in her handwriting, "Our Natalie, strong, steady, loved." I cried. Not because I was grieving anymore, but because I finally felt the weight of their belief in me. And it no longer felt heavy. It felt like wings. I walked outside and sat by the garden. The hydrangeas were blooming again, late this year, but stubborn. Just like me. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I didn't feel like I was surviving. I felt like I was beginning. It's strange how peace doesn't arrive like a grand parade. It comes quietly. Sometimes, on a slow Sunday morning with tea steaming by your side. Sometimes, in the rustle of magnolia leaves out the window. And sometimes, in the absence of noise where anger used to live. It had been 3 months since the trust was released. My family and I weren't suddenly close, but we were softer. There were awkward brunches, cautious texts, the occasional forward of a funny meme from Alyssa. That was enough. One evening, I stood on the dock behind the house, barefoot, watching the tide roll in. The water shimmered under the fading sky like it was carrying stories no one had told yet. And I thought of them, Grandma and Grandpa. How they had seen me. Not for what I did or what I owned. But for who I was becoming. People always assume inheritance is about money. A number in a bank. A house in your name. But that's not what they gave me. They gave me permission. To walk away from a family dynamic that said I had to earn love by staying silent. To rewrite the story that said the loudest, neediest, most difficult people deserved the most attention. To finally believe that I didn't have to apologize for outgrowing the version of myself they kept trying to shrink me back into. You know what the real inheritance was? Clarity. Clarity that I wasn't broken. I was unclaimed. And I've claimed myself now. Not in revenge. Not in pride. But in peace. So if you're listening to this, maybe in your own quiet room, wondering if it's worth fighting for your name, your place, your truth, this is what I can tell you. You don't have to wait for someone else to validate your worth. You get to choose who you become. And I chose me. Thanks for listening. If this story found a quiet corner in your heart, don't forget to subscribe, and if you feel ready, share your own story in the comments. Your voice matters. It always has.